promised last week that I'd be having a little campaign at my local venue, Shears Valley. It ticks all the boxes for me. It's local, I can get back at a decent time, the fishing's amazing, it's just fantastic. So here's the second part of that little mini campaign. So this week, once again, another end peg 30 this week. So bang opposite where I was last week, literally bang opposite. So I felt like it was probably the right end of the lake. It looked really good down the other end. There was like scum up there, but Joe Oakes was on peg 15 opposite me this time. And there was just loads of fish in front of him as he was setting up. Anyway, peg 30, it's one out of the corner, so not quite in the corner, but one out of it. Lovely end peg. Really overgrown actually. The reeds and stuff was growing nuts, so grab the shears, give it a good old trim out. It needed doing. I think that the lads there, Dan and that, are so busy now that they have found it hard to get time to do the bit of gardening, so give it a proper good trim out, so whoever draws peg 30 at the weekend will have a good little edge to fish. And that was the first job really. I spent a good long time making sure that was right, because I know from the week before how important having good margins is at the venue, because you can catch £100 in the last hour and a half quite easily if you get it right. So it was a different day this week. There was no cold wind, so I felt like the fish were going to be a lot more at it this week. And as I said last week, I felt like I complicated things a little bit too much, so I felt like I wanted to refine things a little bit this week. So first swim I plumbed up was again on that top kitten 1. It was a good way to start my match last week. Caught well on that last week early doors, so I fancied that. Again, 4x14 Sipri, exactly the same rig, same shotting, exactly the same. Just I felt like it would be a good way to start off my match. The only thing I was thinking today was, and it was quite funny, Dan came around with his oxygen meter, and he'd thrown it out into the lake, and I forget what the oxygen, I can't quote the numbers, but the oxygen out in the lake was, say, 70% or 75%. Don't quote me on the numbers, but say it was 75%, where it's 8 foot deep out there. He put it in the margins, and it was like 95%. So it was a proper visual representation of how the different oxygen levels are, and it makes it so obvious why fish are happy to be in shallow water in the summer. All the oxygen is either in the top layer of the water or in the edge. Down at the bottom, the water's just not as oxygenated. So with that bit of information in mind, I thought I need somewhere else to fish while my shallow line's building up, in case that top kitten 1 is too deep. And look at the lovely long edge to my right going into the corner. I thought I'm going to plumb up a little Sipri there, 4x12, and fish hard pellets down there, maybe for the first hour or so, just to let my shallow line build. So I'd plumb that up, but it was very much a one and done situation. That, don't get me wrong, if I'd have gone in there and just kept clodding them, then I'd just stick with it, but I felt like it'd just be somewhere to go while I was building everything else up really. Decided to fish out and out pace down the edge, so I've got my just one rig of little pace float. I'm going to do I'm actually going to go on Winning Ways soon. They've invited me to go on, so I'll wait and I'll give you all the details about the rigs and everything on that, because I think it's only fair. So that's exciting. But I just set one edge rig up. It was a lovely depth, 20 inches. I'd have preferred like 18, 17 inches, but 20 inches is fine. And it was just everywhere you put the plummet, the same depth down the edge. Lovely, absolutely lovely. And then it was out and out shallow after that. I went for the F1 rigs this week though. I had a little big head for fishing like really shallow, and I had a couple of tinks set up. Didn't bother with a jig or anything this week. I didn't like the jig of the week before. But I also set up a mugger because where Joe was, there were so many muggers over there. I couldn't ignore it. So I got my couple of F1 rigs set up, and then I got my margins with paste, and then obviously those 2 hard pellet swims. So the match kicked off for me, and I decided to start on that top kit and won. And I pinged an odd pellet up the bank, and I started throwing slop from the start this week because I felt like that was where I'd do my damage this week on that slop. So I started off on top kit and won, and straight away it felt different to the week before. Whereas the week before I was getting knocks and stuff, he was just sat there, and I thought, oh, it's too deep. Anyway, I caught an F1 and a crucian. Missed a couple of bites, which felt very like crucian-y, not carpy at all. And I just put it down. I thought, I'm not even going to pick that up for the rest of the day. Kept feeding my slop. There was an odd fish on that already, but I wanted to build that for like an hour before even looking at it. So I decided to go on that long edge to my right. 30 metres, like I say, 4x12 Cypri. I started off with my shot strung out like I've been doing recently. Hard pellet, and I was missing loads of bites. As soon as I went in, potting in like 10 pellets, sitting there, miss bite, little F1, miss bite, foul hook, miss bite, come off. Oh, it's just really frustrating. I don't really know what was going on, but it felt like there was some fish there, quite a few fish in fact. But I didn't know whether they were just like little F1s, little stockies. Caught an odd little scraggy one, but not really anything to write home about. Anyway, I decided to put the plummet on. And I just took about that much off, and I found a little spot, and it was dead hard because the reeds, I couldn't get too close in, but I found a little spot, probably 2.5 foot. Started there, and it was still missing bites. I'd have preferred to get into even less water, but I couldn't. And suddenly I fouled carp in the tail, which I luckily got in. It was only a little one, but I luckily got that in. And I was like, oh, these are carp, not F1s. Anyway, so I decided to start filling my pot up with pellets, so a proper decent amount, and going in, and filling the pot up with pellets was the game changer, because all of a sudden I wasn't getting those little fish bites. I was just sitting there and waiting, and eventually it just whack under, and I get a carp. And I think I caught 4 carp on this, which for the first hour, when everyone else is sat there mugging an odd one or not catching a great deal, really promising. Really promising. It was like a nice way to fish. It wasn't easy, but I could just sit there, wait for these carp to come along. Now after a bit of fun, 4 carp, a couple of F1s, it definitely faded. I'll tell you what was happening now, even if one came in, it just, as soon as it felt any line in the swim, it just absolutely bolt off into the middle of the lake, and I kind of felt like I'd had my good spell on that, so it was time to try something different. The good news was, by this point, so I'm talking an hour and 15, hour and 20 in, every time I throw my slop in, I'm getting a proper reaction to it. The F1s are swirling on it, even our carp's coming through it. I'm thinking, oh, here we go. This is when my match changes. And I thought, you know, I'm going to go straight in on the pace shallow. Now for the pace shallow, I've just done a video on nufish, which I haven't edited yet, but it will be on there soon, showing how I fish it. And I use a little jigger rig, just set like 8 inches deep, because when you fish slop, they come really high for that pace shallow. Put that on, I've shipped it out, loaded my pot up, slapped it on the surface, and it's just gone straight away. I'm like, yes, here we go. And I've gone out again, and nothing's happened. Not a swirl, nothing. So I've one and done. I'm throwing my slop in, and it's not swirling anymore, nothing. It's like, oh God. So I picked up a different rig, just a standard pellet shallow rig, little dibber, little big head, and I started catching an odd one. It wasn't great, but I could catch an odd one. They were being really funny though. They definitely knew I was fishing for them.
Nick's making a charge now, you know.
Hey, Crewy. I finally mugged one, but it'll come off, won't it? Maybe not, it's just an F1. Single worst bit of netting you've ever seen, that?
I was losing a few as well. I was using white zip. I think I probably should have used that orange from the week before. The white zip felt fine. I was even having to use the puller, but I'd like put the puller on, go like that, and it'd come off. And I've had that on Willow Lake at the venue before, whether it's the strain of F1 or whatever. They've got tiny mouths and you hook quite a few around the mouth, and it can get really frustrating. You because you're getting a bite every chuck in, but you're not necessarily landing a fish. Anyway, I'm working through my rigs. Sometimes the fish would come really high, sometimes they'd drop down to like 2 foot. So I was having to work through my rigs, tapping, slapping. But in the end, the best way I found was to use a little dibber with probably 18 inches of line above it, 2 back shots, throwing a ball of slop in before shipping out, whizzing it out and flicking the rig past the slop, if that makes sense, and letting it come in, and I was catching them quite well doing that. Again though, the same as the week before, whenever carp came into my peg, I couldn't catch F1s, and it was happening time and time again. No bites, no bites, no bites. I'd get a carp or I'd lose it or whatever. And they were causing me a bit of an issue because I'd just get into a nice little run of F1s, and then all of a sudden you can't get a bite again. It was quite frustrating. But it was all about working at it, because it was obvious the lake wasn't fishing great. For a lot of others, Joe Oakes opposite me, great angler, he was catching quite well. He was mugging an odd one, catching in the edge on meat. He was just fishing dead patient in the edge, catching nice F1s, like 2-pounders in the edge, and mugging an odd one. And he'd also obviously seen what I was doing with the slot, mixed himself up a bit, and he was throwing that in, and I thought, it looked like there was a bit of scum gathering at that time over there. I thought, if he starts catching on that, it could be really dangerous. And we were having a really good battle, neck and neck, I'd say, pretty much all the way through. But it was just a case of just concentrating and keeping going as much as I could on that shallow line.
Catch many zander this winter, Joe? Did you?
Anyway, the shallow swim obviously was really reliable, and then we sort of 2 hours to go. The classic 2 o'clock switch on happened. Again, the muggers just disappeared, exactly the same as last week. The muggers just disappear, and all of a sudden I've not fed in the edge again, and there's just colour coming up. And I noticed Joe had already fed his, and he went in on paste in the edge and caught a carp immediately. I'm like, oh, I can take one. then he's gone in again and got a second. I'm like, I can probably take 2 because I'm still catching well shallow at this point. And then he's gone in and got a third dead quick. I'm like, right, I've got to roll my dice. I've got to feed it. So on a top kit, I just dumped in 1 pot of ground bait. Thought I'll leave it, carry on fishing, and literally I've put the pellet back on my shallow rig, gone out, caught an F1. I've looked down and there's like 4 carp like this in the edge. So know what I'm doing here. And what I'd learnt from last week was feeding it dead close to me and then fishing the section past it worked a treat. And I caught 6 or 7 carp down the left hand edge really quickly.
Oh dear. You want it to get out, Joe? You want it out?
Not big ones, but like 4 to 6 pounds, so nice fish. And it was quick. I was like going in, getting a clean bite, wallop, get one, get one, get one. And then it all went a bit funny, really funny. One thing I didn't tell you about at the start, I'd fed like a paste in like 2.5 foot in front of me, like on a top kit, just in case I'd catch an odd one on that. But my left hand edge, they were coming in, and it's like once they get really excited, they become hard to catch. And it's the same what happened last week. I couldn't get my head around it. I was catching like 2 really quick, and then all of a sudden I'd like foul hook a couple, miss a few bites. Couldn't really work it out. It was really frustrating, in fact, and Joe was having the same opposite me. I don't know what was going on. It was really weird, like a really funny spell. Anyway, I'd left the right hand one pretty much alone. I'd put an odd little bit of bait in, but pretty much left it clean. So we're like, I don't know, I'm catching quite well, and I put another net in at 3 o'clock. I'm catching odd fish. I completely lost where I was with my nets at this point. It is a 3 net limit, but on such a hot day, I wanted to give them a bit more space. So I thought, right, finally I'm going to put that net in, see what I can catch. But it took me half an hour to put a fish in it. I just couldn't catch anything. So that was a weird move. And at 3:30, the match finishes at 4. At 3:30, I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? Joe stopped catching, but the other guys at the other end have started catching now. I've got a decent weight at this point. I've got over 100 pound. So I decided to abandon that left-hand edge because they'd turned that into a mess, the fish had. And I went on my right-hand one instead. And what I decided to do was feed, again, really close to me with that ground bait in a little hole, so I could only get like 1 or 2 fish in, and then fish way past, so almost top kitting 2 past it. What was happening, even though I'd not fed there, a couple of carp kept going in this one hole in the reeds. It's like observation is so important sometimes with fishing, and these carp kept going in this one little hole in the reeds. Don't know why, whether there was a bit of clay there or something was there that was kept the carp kept going to it. So I thought, well, that's a gift, isn't it, if you see things like that happening. So I decided to plumb up in that hole. It wasn't clean or anything, it was all rooty, but I thought with paste I can probably get away with it. So I was feeding ground bait short and then past it in this little hole, just hemp, just quite a lot though. I made this big pot out of it, it's like a massive Kinder egg that the little one found at an arcade one day, and I thought, I'm having that. And it holds a proper dollop of hemp, and I was feeding that, and it worked a treat. And all of a sudden I'm motoring now. I'm like, every time I'm going in, dumping that big pot full of hemp in, wallop, getting one as quick as I can get in. Odd miss bite, but all of a sudden it was like a light switch. It was totally different to how it was on that left hand one. So that was the all out. That final flurry in the edge felt really good, and I felt like I regained a bit of an edge over Joe, to be honest. I felt like it was neck and neck all the way through. Then he had a frustrating spell like I did, but he never got over it really. Whereas that little manoeuvre at the end managed to get me them extra fish. And I was interested to see what, bearing in mind I caught one fish at half free that I put in that net. So other than one little fish, everything in that net was caught in the last sort of 25 minutes. That's the net I took out first, and there was £56 in it, which in 25 minutes is ridiculous. They don't look even big. They must weigh £8, but they don't look it. So, you know, you catch 7 or 8 fish and all of a sudden you've got a decent weight. And all my nets had a similar, and I ended up with £195, which was enough to win. So it was a brilliant day. I think I've had £198 actually at shears, but it's certainly my biggest weight of the year this year. But again, I'm like scratching my head a bit, thinking I could definitely improve. So I'm really looking forward to going back next week. Big shout out to Sean Powell, who was on the sunset match. He had £211, which is a new lake record. That is a silverfish lake with loads of F1s in it. Real mixed bag you get in there. But the F1s are starting to come through now, and he had £211 again on paste. I assume little bits of paste. So well done, Sean. Brilliant weight that is for that lake. I think he had the record before with like £170 anyway. So yeah, I think I mentioned last week, like the match is split up into different areas because, like I say, sunset rarely can compete with hurricane and tornado. But if it had been all one big match, it would have done today. But yeah, brilliant day again at Shearsby. I'll be back next week. Hopefully refining my approach a bit more. And yeah, great fishing. Great fishing. And I just can't wait to get back. So thanks everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe, because obviously the subscription helps, and all the likes help more of you to watch these videos. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you again next week.